Hi guys, this video is going to explain the NFL draft. So hopefully if you know all about it or if you know nothing about it, you'll be able to gain a lot from this experience. When I first started to try and get into the NFL, I kind of struggled with the draft. The first draft that I properly watched, I went on YouTube and tried to look for things to explain how it was going to work to me, and to explain all the little intricacies that kind of just happen very quickly, and I couldn't find anything good. So now that I've learnt a lot more, and it's been a few years, I thought I would make a video to help everyone else out who might be in the same situation. Before we discuss the NFL draft itself, it's important to understand how football is organised in the USA. There are two main organisations for football in the US, and these are the NFL and the NCAA. The NFL is the main professional football league, whereas the NCAA is responsible for college football. Players from within the college system are then able to be drafted into the NFL after completing some time at college and being academically eligible for the NFL. Players enter the NCAA system by getting scholarships or simply by being chosen to play at colleges. Players are often scouted from high school, and major colleges in the NCAA include places like Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, to name a few. Players can choose to stay at college for however long they like, but they'll often leave when there's significant interest from an NFL team, and they can often leave college without a degree. However, some do choose to stay and graduate. This is either because they think that playing for longer in college will create more interest from NFL teams, or they simply want to improve their future prospects by having a diploma. The draft's made up of 7 rounds, and overall 256 players are chosen by NFL teams. The NFL itself is made up of 32 teams who each play 16 games before the playoffs each year. The team with the worst win record gets the number 1 overall pick in the draft the next year, and the team who wins the Super Bowl gets the 32nd pick. So the worst team will get the 1st, then the 33rd overall pick, whereas the Super Bowl winner will get the 32nd and the 64th, and so on. Some of you might have noticed that 7 times 32 is not 256. This is because the NFL has a system called compensatory picks, where if a team loses a particularly good free agent, then they get compensation in the form of a draft pick. But these can only be from rounds 3 to 7. The round which the pick is in will depend upon how much money the player is paid by their new team. So, for example, the Miami Dolphins lost Juwan James to the Denver Broncos, and his salary was enough to get them what's expected to be a 3rd round pick in the 2020 draft. Whereas when they lost the much cheaper Brandon Bolden to the New England Patriots, this is only expected to garner them a 7th round pick. Essentially, the draft works like picking players in school. The team with the first pick chooses who they want from eligible college players who have declared for the draft, followed by the second team, then the third, and so on. Obviously, a player can only be picked once. Each team in the league has what's dubbed war room in their facilities, made up of all the key decision makers in the organisation. They make the decision and they call a representative at the draft location who then fills in a piece of paper. The piece of paper is passed to the commissioner on stage who reads it aloud in the format, "With the first pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns select quarterback Baker Mayfield, University of Oklahoma." Each team gets a set amount of time to make their choice, and in the first round, the player who is picked then comes out onto stage. They wear the team's cap and they have a photo with the commissioner on stage holding the team's jersey. Some players choose to stay at home with family whilst others go to the event and get mobbed by interviewers and cameras. College players are judged off of their playing career in high school and college, their personality and intelligence from team interviews, and also workouts at pro days and the NFL Combine. The Combine happens every year. It's where the best prospects are invited to take part in workouts such as the 40-yard dash and the vertical jump in an attempt to make themselves more attractive to NFL teams. Once a player is picked, the team then offers them a contract in the next few weeks, and as a general rule of thumb, The earlier a player is selected in the draft, the better the contract they can expect. For example, in 2018, quarterback Baker Mayfield was selected number 1 overall by the Cleveland Browns, whereas quarterback Mason Rudolph was selected in the 3rd round with pick number 76 by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Both players played at quarterback and both had impressive college careers. However, because Baker Mayfield was widely seen as the better player and was chosen 75 picks earlier, Mayfield received a contract worth over $30 million across 4 years, and Rudolph was given a contract worth $3.9 million across 4 years. Players can choose to reject the contract and not enter into negotiations, but this is very rare, as doing so leaves the player with very few options. Obviously, more than 256 players choose to enter the draft, and some people end up going unpicked. These people become what's called undrafted free agents and can be signed by any team following the draft. These can be players who are seen as not good enough to be chosen but still had some interest from teams, or can be players who may have some concerns surrounding their attitude or their past, such as crimes committed or other issues. Just because a player isn't picked doesn't mean they don't have an impact. However, whilst most don't last long in the NFL and are forced to play elsewhere, such as Canada in the CFL, there are some rare exceptions who've had successful NFL careers, such as Hall of Fame QBs Warren Moon and Kurt Warner, and major NFL contributors like Cam Wake, who had a very successful career with my team, the Miami Dolphins. If you watch any NFL draft film, namely Draft Day, you'll hear a lot about trades in the draft. This is because draft picks can be sent to other teams for players or even for other picks. For example, recently, Antonio Brown was traded from the Steelers to the Raiders in return for the Raiders' 3rd and 5th round pick in the 2019 NFL draft. This means that when the Raiders were meant to pick at 66 and 142 in the 3rd and 5th round, instead the Steelers will get to pick at these positions, and the Raiders in return get the rights and contract of superstar wide receiver Antonio Brown. As I mentioned though, draft picks can also be traded for other draft picks. For example, in the 2019 NFL Draft, it's widely thought that quarterback Kyler Murray will be chosen number 1 overall by the Arizona Cardinals, who ended last year with a record of 3 wins and 13 losses, which is the worst in the NFL, and thus they get to pick first. My team, the Dolphins, however, also like Kyler Murray and would be very interested in choosing him. However, they finished with 7 wins and 9 losses, which is enough to be the 13th worst, and thus they get the 13th pick in the draft. Kyler Murray is extremely unlikely to fall this low, and thus the Dolphins might want to try and move up in the draft. If the Dolphins do choose to do this, they'd need to make an offer to the Cardinals, which would be made up of multiple draft picks and can even include players too. For an example, the Dolphins could offer up their 1st, 2nd and 3rd round picks, which would be 13, 48 and 78, plus their safety, Rashad Jones, in return for the Cardinals' 1st round pick. If the Cardinals accepted this offer, then the Dolphins would have the number 1 pick and could choose Kyler Murray, and the Cardinals would gain more picks and a good player in Rashad Jones. However, an offer like this is usually unrealistic. Very often, to make a move like this happen, not only do teams offer picks in the current year's draft, they also offer picks for next year's draft, and even the year after that. An example of this would be a trade between the Washington Redskins and the St. Louis Rams in the 2012 draft. Quarterback Robert Griffin III was a very exciting prospect, and thus the Redskins wanted to move up the draft board to select him. They chose the Rams as a potential trade partner, and the final accepted offer was the Redskins' 1st and 2nd round pick for 2012, which would be 6 and 39, and then also the Redskins' 1st round picks for 2013 and 2014, which ended up being pick 22 and then pick 2. In exchange for that, they got the 2012 Rams 1st round pick, which was the 2nd pick overall. The Redskins gave up 4 picks just to move up 4 places from 6th overall to 2nd overall. The Redskins basically went broke to get what they thought would be the best quarterbacking years and would set them up for a decade. In the end, they failed, and Robert Griffin III ended up having an injury-filled Redskins career, and this ended up being seen as one of the worst draft trades of all time. Teams in the early rounds hoped to avoid players like Ryan Leaf, who went number 2 overall to the San Diego Chargers in the 1998 NFL Draft. The San Diego Chargers traded up from number 3 overall, using a future first round, a second round, and Pro Bowler Eric Metcalf just to move up one place and choose one of the worst quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. On the flip side, teams pray they can find a hidden gem in the later rounds who will overperform and prove to be massively valuable. The most famous example of this is New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady. He was chosen 199th overall in the 2000 NFL draft and was expected to be nothing but a bench warmer, but he's ended up leading the Patriots to 6 Super Bowls and is seen by many as the best quarterback of all time. The NFL draft is loved because of all the shifts and trades which can happen, but most importantly, the surprising prospects who get picked later on and the draft busts, which happen far too often. Players can fall down the draft boards as controversy surrounds them on the night, and the most recent example of this was Laramie Tunsil. He had a video leaked on draft night of him smoking weed through a bong, and this led teams to panic and choose other players. Another example was Darius Geis. He was widely seen as a great player who did very poorly in team interviews, and in the end he fell much further than anybody expected just because of this. I think that I've covered everything that needs covering in a video like this. This has been a quick summary of the NFL draft, and I hope it's been useful to both newcomers and veterans alike. I look forward to reading your comments, and I hope that you enjoy the draft this year. Thank you so much for watching.